on Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
You're listening to The Jan Price Show, and today my guest is award-winning director Gero von Boehm, and we are talking about his brand new documentary, Helmut Newton, The Bad and the Beautiful. Welcome to the show, Gero.
Oh, thank you. I'm very happy to be with you.
Well, I'm very happy that you're here and on the show, and as we talked about, you're calling from the south of France, so it's lovely to have you on the show from such a long distance.
That's right. Where are you, by the way?
Carmel, California.
Oh, I see. So I don't need to send you sunshine.
Well, right now we have a lot of fog. So okay. We're having our foggy summer. But the sun will come for sure. So this is a fascinating documentary. And for people who don't know who Helmut Newton is, can you just give a little background about who he is and why he's significant and why we should care about this wonderful documentary and his work?
I think his work is important, but his life is also very interesting. He grew up in Berlin in the Weimar time, in the 20s and early 30s, and he was Jewish. So he went out of Germany in the last moment in 1938, went to China, went to Singapore, and then to Australia, where he met his wife, June. And he was marked by the Weimar time and by the German Expressionism, of course, and then by the Nazi imagery. If you're 13 when Hitler comes to power and you're interested in images as a young boy and you take your first pictures, of course, you're influenced by it. I found that very interesting because up to the last moment in his pictures, you can see that influence. And he admitted it. I mean, there's not much to admit, but there's a lot to discuss about that influence. He was accused sometimes to have been influenced by Leni Riefenstahl, for instance, Hitler's huge filmmaker. And this contrast interested me, first of all. And then Helmut Newton revolutionized in the 60s and 70s fashion photography. Everything was beautiful and nice and lovely up to that time. There was Richard Avedon and Irving Penn and beautiful images, but it was a bit boring. And then came Helmut, and all of a sudden, fashion photography was revolutionized. He showed us naked models, sometimes dressed, sometimes half-dressed, sometimes naked. A beautiful, very famous photo of an Yves Saint Laurent tuxedo for women. Saint Laurent created a tuxedo for women, and next to this dressed girl is a naked girl. And this is a beautiful contrast and very controversial from the beginning. And all of that is really of interest, and nobody else has been more influential, I think, on fashion photography than Helmut Newton.
No question about it. No question about it, because he was such he's a genius, a controversial genius. And during that time, what he was doing was so avant-garde that people were just sort of stunned by his photography and what he was doing. But he attracted some of the most beautiful women of that era. Charlotte Rampling and Isabella Rossellini and Grace Jones. And even Anna Wintour's in this wonderful documentary. Tell us a little bit about, there's so many, the list goes on and on. What was it like to attract these women to your documentary about Helmut, and talking about their stories? Was that easy for you to be able to get all of these wonderful, beautiful women together for this documentary?
First of all, I thought, I've read a lot about Helmut Newton, who was a close friend, actually, but I was always interested in the theory of photography. And there are so many essays and statements by gallerists, curators, and photography experts, but mostly men. And I think it's impossible. So carte blanche aux femmes, as we say in French, let the women speak finally about him. I didn't know what to expect, actually, but I selected women who were really who he photographed quite often and who were close to him. And we have to see, I mean, it was not very difficult to get them because they all loved to work with Helmut. We have to consider that they all did it deliberately, also the nude photos. And actually, everybody was eager to be photographed by Newton. They had a lot of confidence. They felt safe with this gentleman. We really have to call him a gentleman. And obviously, the women felt strong as a result of the pictures. Charlotte Rampling says, Helmut gave me an immense power, an inner power. And if he hadn't done those images of me in that halfway rock-down hotel in Arles in the south of France, my career would have been totally different. I was 28 years old at the time. I had done those interesting films like Night Porter, for instance, she says. And here I found my image with those nude photographs in that hotel. By the way, those photos were Charlotte's first nude photos and Helmut's first nude photos.
Oh.
They were both a little embarrassed and said, okay, let's do it quite quickly. And I think it took half an hour, and then those iconic photographs were in the box.
They are iconic of all of these women. And so they obviously had to feel safe with him.
Yeah.
I mean, because there's first of all, this documentary is it's just wonderful and chock full of his incredible photos. But he made all of these. I mean, it was during an era when this wasn't something that was done, but it gave all these women much more. A lot of what they talked about was feeling empowered.
Absolutely.
By stripping everything away. They felt, literally and figuratively, they felt more empowered as a result of having these beautiful photographs taken by him. So, what do you know what his secret was to create this safety for these women to decide to do these beautiful photos?
There was a lightness about that work. He was very humorous. Everybody laughed all the time on set. I was there many times. I filmed there, and it was always a wonderful, humorous and nice atmosphere. That's what they liked. And as you just said, Jan, they felt safe. They felt safe because Helmut Newton was a gentleman. And also we have to consider that his wonderful wife, June, was almost always present at the set. She organized everything. She was running the set, if you will, and Helmut was the little boy playing with his toys, but only playing and not more. That's why those ladies really felt safe. And there was, we have to see his upbringing in the bourgeoisie of Berlin, a wonderful atmosphere, very cultivated. And if you have an upbringing like that, you have a fundament, you have a fundamental thing in you. And with this fundamental thing, you can play. You can become a naughty boy, you can become an anarchist, but there's always this foundation, and you stay a gentleman. And that's why, there was never anything about Me Too or something like that. It was out of the question. That's why the women felt safe. Mm-hmm. Not that he didn't have his little affairs, but never with models. He always said, Dienst ist Dienst and Schnaps is Schnaps. Work is work and Schnaps is Schnaps. Do you know what Schnaps is?
Yes.
Whiskey is whiskey, let's say.
Yes, yeah. Interesting. So how did you meet him? How did you meet him, and what was your relationship like with Helmut?
A total coincidence. I knew his photographs, of course. I loved many of them. I admired his work. And then all of a sudden, on an evening in Paris, we were invited by mutual friends, and we didn't know of each other, that we were both invited. But it was 7 people were present. And next to Helmut, a blonde lady from the Paris bourgeoisie, haute volée, was sitting. And we both, Helmut and I, sent little messages with our eyes over the table because the lady was not very intelligent and she made silly remarks. And after that dinner, we understood each other immediately. I think we had the same sense of humor, the same sense of funny situations. And then I visited him in Monte Carlo, where he was living at the time. And I visited him in LA, where he was living 4 months a year at the Chateau Marmont. I was shooting a film with David Hockney at the time. And by coincidence, again, I stayed at the same hotel at the Chateau Marmont, and we became friends. It didn't mean that the film came naturally, because I had to convince June, of course, because she was very protective and Helmut was her Helmut, and she filmed with him. And much of that material is in my documentary, by the way, because generously she gave it to us, so I could use it. But it took 3 years to convince them both, because even Helmut was hesitating, because photographers don't love to be filmed while they work. You have to seduce them. And finally, I seduced both of them. Out came a first documentary for television, but I had a lot of footage left, and I always thought I have to use it at some point. And also I thought those images of the strong women, the big nudes, for instance, are iconic in Helmut's work. They need the big screen. You have to show those images on the big screen. And I think Helmut would have loved it because he was a film buff. Absolutely. He adored films, old black and white films from Germany, but all the films. He was totally in that film world. And if you look closely at his photographs, they are little films, actually. They tell stories, or sometimes the beginning of a story or the end of a story, and everything else is up to your fantasy. That's so fantastic about his photographs. It's not just, a naked woman or beautiful clothes on a beautiful woman, but it's always a story involved.
What was the reaction when these photos first were released out into the public? What kind of a reaction did he get?
It was, of course, for many people, it was a shock. But one has to see, it's a very good question, by the way, one has to see the photographs, especially the nude ones, in the context of the times of the late 60s and early 70s. The sexual revolution had just happened. The naked body was no longer a taboo, and also everybody was waiting for a revolution in fashion photography. There were those marvelous pictures, as I said before, by Richard Avedon and Irving Penn, real icons, but they were icons of beauty and loveliness. And what was needed was not only loveliness, but what Anna Wintour calls in the film stoppers in the magazine, something in reference, let's say, to the world at large, to the culture of something provocative. And here was Helmut ready to do that and to fulfill the demand. And like two electrical contacts come together and make bzzzt, and here he was and made an incredible career in that time, And for instance, there is this, and I included it in the documentary, there is this famous diptych by him, two separate photographs. On the left-hand side, you see models beautifully dressed in wonderful, expensive haute couture clothes. And on the second photo, on the right side, the same girls in the same poses, but totally naked, but in exactly the same pose, as if a magician had taken the clothes away from them. And what does the photo tell us? Strong women are strong even without clothes. That was his message, Amazing, actually, that the industry at the time accepted him, because it was new. It was revolutionary, but it was a great success.
It was. And so today, would you think in today's world that Helmut would be, if he had not done what he had done in the late 60s and 70s and revolutionized, was a revolutionary and the way that he photographed women, let's say this never happened, and now he was coming in, doing this in today's world, how do you think he would be received and perceived?
he would not be received and perceived because it would simply be impossible. No magazine would print, especially those nude photographs, you know. I mean, some of his photographs which are not nude still have an incredible modernity, but the more provocative ones wouldn't be published today. It's simply impossible because we are living in a very politically correct time. This is what counts for society, political correctness. And there's always this discussion, you know about it, to ban nude paintings from museums. And interestingly enough, there's no museum who has a permanent Helmut Newton exhibition. There is no gallery representing Helmut Newton in the United States. I'm talking about the States now. The atmosphere is especially politically correct. And I think it's dangerous. Everything should be there. Everything should be visible. And we shouldn't ban things. I'm always afraid of people dictating me taste or something like that. I think it's important that everything is visible. Nobody is forced to look at pictures, but they should be there. And it's the Newton pictures are of historical value because they tell us about the 60s and 70s and then the early 80s. It's very interesting. But I think it would be impossible today. Nobody would print his nude photographs.
It's fascinating, is it, how we have become, you're right, politically correct, but not only that, how we've become, kind of going back to a different era, but more prudish in the way we view the world. Yes. I mean, when you go, definitely, and when you go back and look at the artwork of, the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, the female body was revered and beautiful, and now we need to feel like we must be covered up. Again, it's taking away, even for women, some of our liberty, to express ourselves. We feel like, we can't do that. And that's sort of a shame.
It's wonderful that you say that, Jen, because this is absolutely the case. And I think the most photographs, the nude photographs of Helmut Newton, show us really strong women. That was his message, to show us how strong women are. And they tell us, okay, men, you can glare and glaze at us, but not me, not us. We are strong. Don't touch us.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what's the beauty of this, because his photos are just absolutely stunningly beautiful and interesting, and really do stretch the imagination, and I won't even get into some of the things that the way he photographed, but that they didn't come off as erotic. Does that make sense? They came across as art.
Absolutely. Yes.
And not as we're being voyeurs, peeking through the peephole of female sexuality. None of that. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was just strictly the beauty of the female form and all of its glory. Go on.
And even more than that, because he wanted to show the society which surrounds women. That was very important to him. So when he shows us Nadja Auermann laying on a hotel bed somewhere in Monte Carlo with her hair undone in a very how can I say, in a pose where you ask yourself what happened before. Mm-hmm. He wants to tell us she looks like a Barbie doll, which has been left there in that hotel room, children leave their dolls somewhere. And his message was, men, it was to us men he spoke with this photo, don't treat your ladies like Barbie dolls. They're much more than that. Mm-hmm. So he always held a mirror in front of us men. And I think that's very important. Again, Nadja Auermann in a wheelchair and with crutches. Mm-hmm. Why? It was provocative, of course, but he wanted, and that's his black humor actually, he wanted to tell us about the difficulty of women walking in high heels. Actually, they can't walk. You have to wheel them. Or you need clutches.
Mm-hmm. He was very provocative in what he did. Oh, no question about it. I love the story Grace Jones talks about. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because it's a sort of an interesting how she finally became one of his models, and but it didn't happen right away for her.
No, not at all. And Helmut, of course, he was absolutely fascinated by Grace Jones' face in the early 80s when she really, it was a little bit earlier. She wasn't the star we know today. And he invited her to so-called go-sees where models present themselves. And she went, and Helmut talked to her, and then he said, "Oh, very nice, but unfortunately your breasts are too small. I can't take pictures with you. Your breasts are too small." And Grace thought he will never call again, and she was very disappointed because, of course, she was excited before, and now she was disappointed. But Helmut kept calling her, and second time, a third time, and she went, and every time he said, "Oh, Grace, I forgot you have so small breasts." But finally, they did this famous shoot with Grace Jones at Dolph Lundgren. Mm-hmm. At the time, Grace was in a James Bond movie, and they had become a famous couple in Hollywood. And then for Playboy, Helmut finally photographed with her. But before, it took quite some time because Grace's breasts were too small.
It's so amazing that he kept calling her back, and then
called her back, and he always forgot.
And finally he realized, I've got to photograph her. I mean, and she's still stunning. I mean, absolutely stunning. Tell us a little bit about the story of Anna Wintour. She's in this documentary quite a bit, but the first meeting that she was supposed to have with Helmut in California. Can you share that story?
Absolutely. At the time, she was in London with British Vogue, and a shooting with Helmut Newton was scheduled. And of course, she was very excited to work with the great Helmut Newton, and she was so excited that she cancelled. She sent her assistant, and she said she was sick and she couldn't go because she was scared. And then, of course, later they became real friends and worked together so much. But in the first place, Anna Wintour just couldn't go. She was scared by Helmut Newton.
Isn't that amazing? Because I think so many people are afraid of Anna Wintour. So to hear that she was afraid of Helmut. So
I never understood, Jan, why people are so scared by Anna Wintour. She has a wonderful sense of humor. She's a great lady, and I never understood that. She's just very straightforward and knows what she wants. And if you know that, the communication with her is very easy. I didn't have any difficulty. She was lovely.
Yeah, well, I think because she's such a giant in the industry that people have, a natural, or she has an aura around her. So where can people see this wonderful documentary, Helmut Newton, The Bad and the Beautiful, Gero?
Since the cinemas in the United States, opposed to Europe, are still closed, you can download it. It's streamed by www.kinolorber.com, Kino LORBER.com, or Kino Marquee, MARQUE.com.
Thank you, Gero. It's been such an honor to have you on the show, and I wish you much success with this film. And it's just a wonderful movie, and I highly recommend everybody seek it out.
It was an honor for me, Jen, to be on your show, which I love.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care and stay safe.
Yes, you too.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. If you have missed any of the Jan Price shows, you can listen to them whenever, wherever at thejanpriceshow.com or on the iHeart Podcast Network, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play. And like The Jan Price Show on Facebook and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at The Jan Price Show. Thank you for listening.
On Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1, streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.